Okay, so thank you guys so much for joining us today for this webinar. One of the things that I'm most passionate about is helping small businesses transition to selling online. Um, I think that, e-commerce is a really big part of small business and especially for product-based businesses, but there are, of course, ways that we can integrate it into service-based businesses as well. So thank you for joining. And if you happen to have questions, feel free to let me know. Just for a little bit of an introduction, for those of you who don't know me, I do see some familiar names for the participants here, which is really exciting to see. But my name is Alyssa, and I'm the owner of the Social Factory located here in Woodstock. I'm born and raised in Oxford County, so I'm super passionate about this community. I've been doing my business now full-time since the fall of 2019, but I did work it in addition to my full-time business, as is common with a lot of small business owners, and kind of did that for about 6 years or so while working full-time. So I do everything from e-commerce website design to informational website design, graphic design, brand development, and social media strategy. So we're going to focus on e-commerce today. And I think what's been really evident, especially this last year, is the importance of having multiple areas that you can access your consumer. I had a lot of small business owners who were forced to temporarily close their brick and mortar locations because of the pandemic and move to online. And it was one of those things where, until it happens, you don't necessarily know that you need to have these secondary options. So we're going to talk a little bit about e-commerce and some different things that make up that e-commerce puzzle. Because it's definitely one of those things where there's a lot involved with e-commerce. And I think that it can be a little bit intimidating for people who maybe haven't quite dipped their toe into the e-commerce pool. So hopefully this helps to simplify and answer any questions that you may have been thinking about. So for the agenda, we're going to go over a couple different things. The first thing that we're going to talk about is understanding the overall benefits of e-commerce and how to use e-commerce to actually grow your customer base, ensuring that you use the right platform for your product and your industry and your intended growth, and then some different assets that are required for e-commerce, because anyone that has been online shopping or has a website knows that e-commerce is most definitely more than just throwing a website up and sitting back and waiting for sales to roll in. We're also going to talk about updating the workflows for efficient order processing. And we're going to talk about how to drive traffic and convert that traffic into sales. So firstly, the benefits of having your own e-commerce platform. And the reason that I add your own as kind of a caveat here is because there are platforms like Etsy, which we will discuss as well, that are not necessarily the same as owning your own e-commerce website. And I'll talk a little bit about how that differs moving forward. So the first benefit of having your own e-commerce platform is for search engine optimization. So otherwise known as SEO. SEO is one of those things that you've probably heard about if you've been doing any sort of research or spent any time online in trying to grow your own website. It's definitely one of those things that can be tricky to try to articulate because it's not a tangible physical thing. Search engine optimization is essentially the difference between your business appearing on the front page of Google or the 10th page of Google where nobody will find it. So there are a couple different ways that having SEO can contribute to your overall business, but one of the benefits of having an e-commerce platform is that it contributes to your SEO. So it's an additional way to increase your online presence and drive traffic to your brand through Google rankings. Another benefit of having your e-commerce platform is expanding your target audience. So if you think about shopping local or shopping downtown, that really is a very specific target audience that you are likely going to be attracting. So if you're a brick and mortar location, for example, then you have people who come directly to your store to make their purchases. The nice thing about e-commerce is that it really expands that reach. So by introducing an e-commerce platform to your existing business, you're actually opening your business up to that additional consumer base that may not have found you at a brick and mortar, and therefore it extends your overall reach and your brand awareness. Another benefit is the ease of use for the consumer. The nice thing about an e-commerce website is it allows for your customer to peruse at their own pace. So there's no like pushy kind of sales tactics involved. It really leaves the purchasing decision to the consumer. If you're like me, you probably also make impulse purchases online. So we do take advantage of those impulse purchases by having an e-commerce platform. And it also encourages the pressure-free purchase and decision-making for the consumer so that they can really feel in charge of that decision. One of the major benefits for a lot of clients is that it streamlines your process. So as a small business, you're probably on social media, you probably have email, you probably have word of mouth, referrals. So you're getting business potentially, orders potentially from all sorts of different areas via text or instant DM, your Facebook Messenger, Instagram comments, email. Your mom texts you and her friend Barbara wants a product that you sell. So it can be really difficult to keep tabs on all of these different customers and what it is that they're looking for. And therefore, sometimes people can fall through the cracks. So the nice thing is that e-commerce really helps to streamline your process. An e-commerce website keeps all of your orders in one spot, which streamlines that overall process and encourages efficiency and enhanced customer service because you don't have to worry about staying on top of all of these individual messages and orders that are coming in. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is actually exploring the e-commerce options. This, for a lot of people, is probably the hardest thing because they see all of this information out there about the different possibilities and platforms that are available to them for e-commerce, but they don't know what makes the most sense for them and their business, where to start, pricing information that could be involved. So I broke it down into a bit of a chart that I hope will be fairly easy to navigate. It has the most important information available. So I'm just going to scoot you guys out of my screen so that I can see here. Okay, so when we're trying to decide what makes the most sense for you and for your business, there are a couple of questions that I tend to ask clients. So I want to know how many products you plan on carrying. I want to know where you plan on shipping, or if you're planning on keeping things local. Are you looking to be able to manage your website after the fact on your own? Or do you want to hire someone to do that full time? And is this something that you're hoping turns into a full-time job, or is it more of a hobby, something to bring in a little bit extra in addition to working full-time? So that kind of helps me to determine what platform might be the best for my client. Shopify is really great for large businesses with many listings. It's also really great if you are a smaller business, but you're looking to eventually scale into a larger business. The nice thing about Shopify is that it's extremely user-friendly, and it's also really easy for both the person managing the back end as well as the front end user, because it's pretty seamless. It's easy to navigate. Even if you're a beginner and you don't have any sort of website development or design experience, Shopify utilizes templates, which are essentially a drag and drop kind of modular style that can be really easy to navigate and use, even if you're not the most tech savvy person. It has a starting monthly fee of $23 US. Now, that's something to be mindful of because $23 US with our conversion rate is a little bit steep for a monthly price. So, and that is the lower end of the Shopify pricing. So if we're looking at just a beginning business looking to get started on e-commerce that wants to use Shopify, the $23 US a month can be a bit of an investment to make. Alternatively, we have WordPress.org. So when a lot of people think of WordPress, they think of WordPress.com, which was used for blogging about like 10 years ago. It was really popular for blogs. WordPress.org is its own entity. It is hosted through a third-party hosting platform as opposed to being self-hosted. So on average, the hosting fee is actually about $13 per month, which is a lot cheaper if you're looking at comparing it to some of the other options that are on here. It is difficult to navigate the dashboard if you don't have WordPress experience and you're not planning on learning about WordPress from either your developer or taking a course online. It can be a little bit overwhelming on the back end, most definitely. If now we look at Squarespace, which is really great for small do-it-yourself kind of businesses. So again, someone that maybe wants to do everything from start to finish, from the design to maintaining it long-term. It's user-friendly, similarly to Shopify, and it is a little bit cheaper than Shopify as well. But we do have some limitations that we're going to talk about for both Squarespace and for Shopify, as well as for Etsy. Going back to WordPress, it's really a great tool and platform to use if you're needing a high-functioning, highly customizable website with specific features. So I can get into a couple of areas where that might make, say that 12 times fast, the most sense for you, depending on the industry and the product that you carry. Alternatively, we have Etsy. So Etsy, as I mentioned, is really great for hobbyists. And it can be great if you're just looking to have some product up and kind of see what the market's going to do and if there is really a need for your product. It's user-friendly, even for beginners, and it's free to sign up, but it is 20 cents per listing plus a 3.5% transaction fee on the sale price. So that's important to be mindful of, especially if we're looking at integrating other point of sale options like PayPal or the use of credit card on Etsy, because there are separate transactions associated with those point of sale options as well, which can make Etsy a little bit more pricey on each transaction. So going back over to Shopify, if we're now looking at the actual cost for hosting these kinds of platforms. So Shopify, as I mentioned, they have a monthly fee. They're hosted internally. So the fee that you pay covers for the cost of your website being held with Shopify. Now, Shopify, WordPress, and Squarespace all have a similar transaction fee of 2.9% plus 30 cents based on the point of sale system that's used. So Square, Stripe, PayPal, those three all have the exact same transaction fee of 2.9% plus the 30 cent charge based on the point of sale. So that's pretty consistent across these platforms. You'll see Squarespace is actually 3%. The difference between 2.9 and 3, obviously not a huge difference, but it's definitely something to be mindful of if you're trying to determine which platform makes the most sense for you. Etsy, one of the limitations for Etsy is, of course, you're forced to work within the restraints of Etsy. So there's not a ton of opportunity for customization or designing, and your shop looks pretty similar to every other shop that is going to be next to it on Etsy. Another limitation about Etsy is that it lists your product directly next to competitors. So if you're familiar with Etsy, if you click on a product page, it also at the bottom of that product page shows you similar products from other shops, which isn't ideal as the business owner who's trying to make a sale and trying to build this brand awareness. So it can be difficult to generate sales because Etsy is such a saturated market. Squarespace, WordPress, and Shopify are all their own platforms. You have your own website hosted on each of these platforms, and therefore it's a standalone brand. Now, Squarespace, also a little bit limited when it comes to customization. Both Squarespace and Shopify work within templates, so you can select a free template. Shopify, you can upgrade to a paid template, which has a little bit more customization, but you're still kind of limited within what you're able to do within those templates. So if you're not looking for anything above and beyond or extraordinary, Squarespace or Shopify are really great solutions, especially if you want to be the one to do most of the legwork and the maintenance long term. Now, with Shopify, there are apps, which are essentially the equivalent of plugins, if you're familiar with WordPress. So apps can be installed kind of as a way to bridge those gaps or add some additional customization features. So that's something to consider if you're thinking of Shopify as an option. The nice thing about WordPress is that it's highly customizable with various template and plugin options. So even if you start from a template with WordPress, and if you have code experience or if you're working with a developer for your website, they'll be able to tweak and modify your website so that it's completely customizable, which is something that a lot of people are kind of gravitated towards with WordPress. So that's something to be mindful of as well. Now, when we're talking about required assets for e-commerce, there are a few things that we need to be mindful of. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, your point of sale system, which is the payment processor on your website, will take a fee. Most of them are at that 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. Square, PayPal, and Stripe are all the same in that sense. Shopify has its own payment processing system that you have to use, but you can add additional point of sale options also. So you have a couple of different opportunities in that way. I tend to encourage a lot of clients to incorporate multiple point of sale options. So if you're having Square on your website, maybe also have PayPal. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, especially with PayPal, a lot of people tend to have a PayPal balance, or they might have their credit card information saved on their PayPal account. So it's a lot easier for them to just log into their PayPal account to complete a transaction, as opposed to get up from whatever they're doing, go find their wallet, dig out their credit card, come back. Like, unfortunately, it's a shame to say, but as a millennial, I feel like I can say it, like, people can be lazy, and making it really easy for them to just process the sale is really a great way to guarantee that a user is going to make that purchase when they want to. And that's kind of that impulse purchase that we were talking about earlier as well, instead of potentially losing them because they don't have their credit card information on hand. There have been numerous times that I personally have been shopping online, and if I don't have access to my PayPal account for payment, then I'm exiting out of the website. And if I remember to go back, I remember, but if I don't, then that's a sale that's been lost. Something else to consider is shipping. Whenever I have clients reach out, one of the biggest things that they fail to kind of think about are some of these logistics surrounding e-commerce. So when we're thinking about shipping, we're not just talking about maybe the courier choice that you want to work with, We're also talking about the costs associated with it. We're talking about if it's going to have the opportunity for local delivery and pickup, or if flat rate is going to be an option that we want to work with. There's also the opportunity for free shipping over X amount of product, whatever that makes the most sense for you and for your product and business. Or there are shipping calculators that are available. A very common one that I tend to use for clients is through Canada Post Small Business, which requires the parcel measurements and the weight to be entered for each product, so that once a user completes their order and they've added all of their products to their shopping cart, they can go, and this calculator will provide them with 3 different options, one being an expedited shipping option, a standard shipping option, and overnight shipping, for example. So based on the size and the weight of the products that they've added to their cart, they can then choose the shipping option that makes the most sense for them or is the most feasible. So it kind of leaves the final decision in the hand of the consumer. Are there any questions so far, Lindsay, that I'm not seeing?
Not yet,
Okay, perfect.
but I have the chat open if anyone wants to put a question in there. I'm still keeping an eye on it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So another thing that makes for a really comprehensive e-commerce website in terms of assets is your product listing, of course. So I pulled just an example listing from a client here. So something that makes a really great product listing, of course, a clean, high resolution image. Ideally, you'll have more than one for the product gallery, so that a user can kind of click between the different images that are there. It's a really great option if you sell something like t-shirts, for example, to have maybe the size chart or the size guide as an image that the user can then click through and see. Something else to include, of course, is the description of the product. So that can be as thorough or limited as you'd like. You can see based on this product description, it's quite thorough. We have everything from the actual description of the product to specifications of the product. And of course, this is also something that really assists to your search engine optimization as well, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. We also have the product price in the category to allow the user to filter. So if a user wants to look for, in this scenario, a wig, they can sort by the length of the wig, the color of the wig, the overall style of the wig. So categorization becomes really important for e-commerce. Variations, again, if you're selling something that has multiple variations, so maybe it's a different size option or color option, the length of a necklace, for example, it's good to include the different variations that are available so that a user can easily, again, process the transaction that they're hoping to make, and it's making the whole process really seamless for them. Something else that can be important to add, if you have access to them, are product reviews. So product reviews can help add legitimacy to your website and to the specific product. So especially if you're selling something that maybe is an article of clothing that looks different on different body types, for example, it might be good to have the opportunity for users to leave product reviews so that they can let other prospective customers know the fit or the style of that specific product. The next thing that we're going to talk about are updated workflows for order processing. So I'm not sure how many of us here are super in tune with things like drop shipping or just like standard e-commerce here, but I've broken it down because they are super similar in terms of the actual workflow. So in terms of the actual order, when an order is placed by the customer online, An order confirmation is then received by email by both the customer and you as the merchant. So the order is then created by you as the merchant. I say created, but it could be pulled from stock if you hold inventory. And then the order is shipped or delivered by the merchant. The order status is updated to shipped, and then the customer receives their order. Now, the idea of having an e-commerce platform can be really intimidating for a lot of people because they don't necessarily understand the processes of it. But this really breaks down the simplicity from the order placed by the consumer to the customer receiving their order and your steps that are required in between. Now, of course, there are things that can be integrated into the website to make things a little bit more, I guess, complicated potentially. So things like integrating your point of sale system, if you have a point of sale that's used both at a brick and mortar location or in-person location, and then you want it synced to your product that's being used online, that can be a little bit more challenging, but of course it ends up being beneficial because you then have the opportunity to ensure that your stock is being reflected both in person and online. So something to keep in mind is that there may be some of those integrations that need to occur, whether that is integrating your QuickBooks, integrating your Square terminal, or other point of sale system, and just ensuring that your product is synced so that whatever is online is reflective of what you actually have in stock. Now, if we're talking about drop shipping, which is essentially removing you as the person to fulfill orders and instead shipping directly from a warehouse. So you hold no stock, you simply place the order through the customer. The order then goes directly to the warehouse or the manufacturer. The order is created and pulled from stock by the warehouse and then shipped by the warehouse. Your order is then updated to shipped by the warehouse, and then the customer receives the order. So drop shipping is something that has been around for quite a while. If you're familiar with AliExpress or Alibaba, there are a couple of different really common drop shipping partners that are out there, but it's definitely something to keep in mind for those who maybe are looking to supplement some income or look at secondary income streams. Now, of course, it's a little bit different if we're talking about service-based businesses, because service is something that is a little bit less tangible. So where an order might be placed by a customer online for something like a consultation or a course or a nutrition program, we then have to fulfill the order that has been placed in a little bit of a different way, because there is that obligation of fulfilling our end, instead of just handing over a product and then we're done with it. So a couple of different things to keep in mind are, even for service-based businesses, there are ways to make our services into tangible products. So things like, if we are looking at a nutrition plan, for example, maybe having a variety of nutrition plans available depending on the dietary needs of the person that is looking at the website. So they have the ability to choose which dietary plan makes the most sense for them. They could then purchase that plan and receive a downloadable link to either a video or a PDF that highlights that service. So if you've created a course, for example, that would be a good opportunity to integrate for a service-based business so that you're able to take advantage of everything that e-commerce has to offer, even though you maybe don't have a traditional tangible physical product. So one of the nice things about the e-commerce workflow is that it eliminates tire kickers. So we've all dealt with them, I'm sure. They're people who appear to be interested and use your time and the energy, of course, that comes with that, but that may never actually convert to a sale. It also reduces the opportunity for missed orders because everything is located in one spot as opposed to scattered throughout several social media inboxes or emails. And it automatically manages stock on your behalf. Now, I say automatically manages stock on your behalf exclusively if you have the product online. If you have product that you carry in person and sell in person as well, then of course, as I mentioned, there needs to be a little bit of integration that occurs to ensure that the stock that you carry online is also reflective of any in-person purchases that occur, which is where some of that syncing happens from the point of sale platforms or something like QuickBooks. Now, this one we had a lot of conversation around when Lindsay posted about this webinar. One of the biggest things that we saw in terms of the interest and questions were about how to actually drive traffic to your website and have it convert into sales. So there are definitely a bunch of different ways to go about this. This is one of my favorite questions. I know it's one of Lindsay's favorite questions as well, because having an e-commerce platform is all well and good, but if it's not actually working for you, then, what's the point in having it in the first place? So as someone who does marketing for a living, the actual idea of driving the traffic and getting it to convert is something that I find to be super interesting. So we're going to talk first a little bit more in depth about the idea of search engine optimization. So again, we're determining things like what keywords, for example, your ideal customers are most likely typing into Google to find a product or a business like yours, and you then want to populate your website with those keywords. So I'm not talking about absolutely flooding every opportunity, text box, footer, with these keywords. They do need to be integrated in a way that is somewhat natural, but by integrating these keywords into product descriptions or page descriptions, your about page even, for example, these are all really great ways for Google to recognize that, oh, this person typed in this keyword appears on this website, so we're going to show this website to this person who has typed in this keyword. It's very much something, as I mentioned earlier, that isn't a physically tangible thing. So it can be really kind of hard and confusing to grasp the idea of search engine optimization. And the algorithms change very frequently. So just being mindful that, maybe when I introduce a new product, I need to update some of my keywords. Or if you hear from people, hey, I searched for this specific keyword and your website came up, that will give you an idea of, how people are actually finding you if it's not a direct link or a referral link from social media. The next point for search engine optimization is to ensure that each of your products has a unique and relevant product description and or meta tag. So meta tags, again, sound a little bit complicated, but all it is the description that appears on Google under that product. So it's nothing fancy. It is usually at the bottom of the page on your product. There's usually a little space for it called meta description, and you can enter in a specific description there. So it's really important to include things like the actual name of the product, the brand of the product, if it is a recognizable brand. Those are a couple things. If you want to be able to sell in person and take advantage of that as well, then having the opportunity to also add your location into the meta description could be helpful. But of course, if not the meta description, make sure that your product description is thorough and as comprehensive as possible. The next thing is to give your image file names purposeful names that describe the product. So I'm guilty as anybody else of saving an image and not renaming it and just keeping that 10-digit assortment of numbers and letters as the file name, as I have here as an example. Alternatively, you should be naming the actual file name based on what the product in the picture is. So instead of calling it 4822935.789.jpg, I maybe want to call it whitechanelbag.jpg because that's something that Google is actually going to recognize. So that all adds back to my SEO. It's also more beneficial because those who might be using things like screen readers aren't going to understand that this image is actually a part of the product description. Whereas if it has a relevant name, the screen reader will pick up on that and therefore communicate it to the user. So it's really great from an accessibility standpoint as well. Another thing that you can do for search engine optimization is actually blogging. So if you have some extra time to blog using evergreen content, and when I say evergreen, I mean content that's going to be timeless. So instead of being super specific, you might want to do something that is a bit more timeless so that it's something that is relevant this year, next year, the year after. And therefore, people will likely still be searching for that kind of content. Now, ideally, that content will also naturally be filled with some of those keywords that we talked about earlier. But we also are hoping to see that there are some interlinks happening within that content. So maybe I have a post about, timeless interior design trends. And within that post, I'm going to link to specific products on my website to ideally drive people to those products. Now, even if I'm not successful in driving people to those products, the nice thing is that all of that interlinking adds to my SEO juice. So it actually makes it look like I have more authority because I have links pointing to my page than I actually do. Now, plugins or apps. So plugins, if we're talking about WordPress, apps, if we're talking about Shopify, are some of my favorite things because it really makes you feel like you can bridge so many gaps that might be appearing on things like Shopify. So for example, if I'm not seeing any sort of conversions happening, these are a couple of different areas that I might look to generate some of those sales and really make it so that I'm optimizing my website to the best of my ability. So the first thing, there is a plugin that has a little running tally at the top of your page that says you have X amount until you hit free shipping. So that encourages the person who is doing the online shopping, like, oh, I'm only $3 or $5 away from hitting free shipping. I might as well add something of a small value to my cart because I'd rather pay that amount and get something in return than just pay that amount for the cost of shipping. So adding in a plugin like that is a really great idea. Another idea is upselling products. So there are plugins that allow for you to upsell product by optimizing your related product areas. So essentially on your specific product page, there's a related product area and you can enter in the names of other products that are relevant to that product so that on the front end of the website, the user will see your product and then they will see a few other products by you that are similar or related. And that gives you the opportunity to upsell for your user. Another pop-up that I use for some clients is Alyssa just purchased this red t-shirt and it pops up in the bottom corner. So if I'm a user, I'm seeing like, oh, there's a demand for this specific product, or maybe it's a product that I hadn't even seen on the website yet that catches my eye. But knowing that someone else has actually gone ahead and purchased it adds to the legitimacy of the website. And it also makes me think maybe I should purchase something because it's obviously in higher demand and I don't want to risk that product being sold out. by the time I'm ready to jump and make a purchase. So we're really taking advantage of that exclusive factor as well as the impulse buy. Abandoned cart plugins are something that are super popular. If you have ever left any sort of product in a cart on a larger website, you've probably received an email after the fact saying, hey, you left this item in your cart. And it can be a really great way to remind people like, hey, you were here, like we know you were here, we know you didn't actually make this purchase, but just wanted to remind you that the product is here if and when you want to purchase it. So sending out an abandoned cart plugin or an abandoned cart memo is a really great opportunity to kind of get back on the radar of the consumer and try to reel them back in. Another alternative, a newsletter pop-up. So one of the really great things about having a newsletter, firstly, is if social media were to disappear tomorrow, it's really important to still be able to connect directly with your consumer. So creating a newsletter subscriber list is a really great way to be able to get directly in front of your consumer, whether they are an active consumer or a prospective consumer. So ideally, you could add a newsletter pop-up to your website and encourage users to sign up with an incentive, something that says sign up for 10% off your first purchase, and then include a discount code into that initial email. There are a few different ways to kind of utilize these pop-ups and newsletter subscriptions in a way that can convert into sales. So in addition to the incentive of a discount, you could give incentive by letting people know that if they subscribe to your newsletter, that they'll be the first to learn of any promotions or new products that come up, and therefore they get first go at any of that new product or any of those deals that you might be dealing with. And then lastly, one of the plugins that I find works really well is a wish list plugin. So having the ability for the user to add to their wish list actually encourages them to store that desirable product and return to complete a purchase after the fact, or share the wish list with a loved one if their birthday is coming up. So this also makes it really nice because not only can they then track the product that they're interested in, it probably also encourages them to create an account to then create that wish list, which is really great because it shows a little bit more commitment and interest than a user that just goes through the process of a guest checkout on your website. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is integrating tagged products on Instagram. So I get a ton of messages about how to do this. And it sounds complicated, which is why I included a walkthrough. So I'm going to make sure that I get this presentation to Lindsay so that she can send it out to everybody, because there is a really comprehensive walkthrough of how to integrate this into your Instagram account. But the overall idea is that you have a product picture on your Instagram, and instead of tagging it the way that you would tag people, you tag the product. So once you have that shopping catalog integrated into your Instagram account by using a walkthrough like this, you can then actually turn on your shopping and make the content clickable. So you can tag the specific products, and then when a user clicks on that product, it will take them directly to that product page on your website. Now, I will say this is not something that is super compatible with Etsy or Squarespace. It's primarily compatible with Shopify, which is a little bit of an annoyance because, of course, Shopify, as we discussed, is a little bit more expensive per month. But being that they are Shopify and they're one of the biggest online e-commerce platforms that are out there, they unfortunately get a lot of these opportunities that some of those other websites may not have access to. So integrating the tagged products, again, this is a really great way to take advantage of that impulse buying, showing like, hey, this is the shirt that you're looking at that you're interested in. You can click here, it's a direct link right to the product that the user is interested in. Whereas if you see something and you have to play a little bit of that guessing game, it just takes away from the overall user experience. So the whole idea is that we're trying to streamline the user process because we want to make the journey from seeing a product they like to actually completing that purchase as short as possible. And that's what's going to benefit us as the product owners in the long run. So that is kind of my overarching 5 puzzle step for these e-commerce platforms. Now, if there are any specific questions pertaining to anything that we covered or specific questions pertaining to something that I didn't cover that applies directly to your business or to the platform that you're using, feel free to ask now, either in chat or I'm definitely available to answer any questions after the fact if you happen to think of anything.
Alyssa, we had a couple of questions in the chat.
Sure.
The first one had to do with shipping. And I guess the question is more around like how to make sure you've picked the right shipping option for your business. So they said, you know, should they use FedEx or UPS or Canada Post? So I guess just how to decide which shipper to go with.
So that is most definitely a super common concern for a lot of people. And unfortunately, there's no like blanket statement or one size fits all solution when it comes to choosing the proper shipping company for you. So what I encourage everyone to do is take some of the product that you have, take it to either UPS or FedEx or Canada Post, determine what size of packaging is going to best accommodate you and the product that you tend to ship. And that will give you an idea of what the cost of that product is going to look like. And then you can compare it across those different shipping providers. So especially if you're planning on shipping exclusively within Ontario or exclusively within Canada, it's really important to try to get the best deals possible because for some reason, shipping within Canada is more expensive than shipping from Ontario to the furthest southern state in the US. So I think just taking some product that you have and getting accurate quotes from each shipping provider will give you an idea of what makes the most sense based on the product that you have to ship.
Perfect. And then the next question had to do with a newsletter, and Margaret, who asked the question, may need to connect with you after because it's kind of a specific question. But she has a newsletter option, which she's never used because she doesn't know how to send it to her clients on Square without sending it to them each individually or a mass email that others wouldn't be able to see all the emails on the sent. If that makes sense.
Yes, so it's more of a concern of hiding, like having the email look as though it's going to one specific person, but not having to actually go through the process of sending individual emails to everyone.
That's what it sounds like. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm not overly familiar with Square newsletter. I tend to use MailChimp. A lot of clients tend to use MailChimp as well, which allows for you to essentially create or import a list of email addresses. And then you can send out to that specific audience, or you can break your audience down into segments depending on who it is that you're trying to connect with. So we can definitely connect after and I can poke around in your account just because I'm not familiar enough without seeing it to be able to give any super helpful advice. So if you want to reach out to me after, then absolutely I can have a look at that for you.
So we have another question from Todd. And it's a good question because we've done a webinar on this before. We just didn't record it. But the question has to do with e-commerce applications to use in booking for tourism related experiences.
Yes. Okay. So we did do a little webinar on this previously. So there are a couple different options that are out there. There is Square Appointments, which seems to work quite well for people. And then Calendly was the other one that also seems to work fairly well for people. So there are the free options of both of those available. There are a few limitations depending on how many people you're looking to have at one given time. Because I believe, if I recall, it's been a little while since we did this webinar. There can be overlap between appointments, but it can be a little bit challenging with the free version to try to set up group bookings. So if you yourself know that you'll accept 6 people at a time or 10 people at a time or however many people at a time, then you can create that through Calendly or Square as just a separate space and indicate in the description that that space is for up to however many people. Square allows for the user to actually complete the transaction if there's a fee associated with it online. Otherwise, you may have to process the transaction in person if you are looking at using something else like Calendly. Are there any other questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat box at the moment. Okay. But we're coming up on 1 o'clock. So we have a little bit of, there's one question in the question section here. So the question is, are there any limitations for plugins on Squarespace as compared to Shopify?
So Squarespace doesn't have quite the same number of apps and integrations as Shopify does. And Squarespace, I would argue, is also a little bit more limited in terms of the overall templates that are available, as well as point of sale systems. So depending, I believe that the starting rate of the 18 US per month for Squarespace does not include your preferred point of sale systems. So you would then have to be boosted up into the next payment plan. And then you would be able to integrate your preferred point of sale system, for example. So there are definitely areas where they gouge you a little bit depending on how customizable you want the experience to be. I would definitely say that between Squarespace and Shopify, Shopify is superior and more reputable of a company. People trust it both from a user standpoint and front end standpoint to the back end. It has a lot more in terms of your capabilities in the back end and anything that you may need to integrate. So I think between the two, Shopify would be the route that I would go. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I'm just checking back to make sure I haven't missed any questions here. I think we've got all the questions that were submitted. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes in case anyone had any final questions, but we did get the question a couple of times at the beginning. So this presentation will be, so we've recorded it, of course, and then it will be posted on the Community Futures Oxford YouTube channel, hopefully later today, for sure by tomorrow. So when you get a follow-up email in a couple of days, I'll make sure I include the link so you can replay it or send it to a friend, whatever you'd like to do. And there's also going to be a survey link in that follow-up email. I'm just going to turn my camera on. It feels weird to be, oh, that's okay.
Sitting in the darkness.
And in the email, we're going to ask if you wanted another opportunity to have kind of a workshop that would build on what we did today and kind of focus on one really specific topic or a couple really specific topics. We could get into a little bit more detail on some of the aspects we covered today. So we'll hope to gather some of that information and we can bring some more details later. So are there any last questions?
And if anyone happens to have any questions that come up after the fact as well, feel free to reach out. I can put my contact information in this chat here, so I can add my email address just so that anyone who might be looking for it can access it. Do I have, oh, I see a question here. Do I have any experience with Shopify Plus? I do have some clients that use Shopify Plus that I've done design work for. And as I mentioned as well, I'll include that the walkthrough for the integration of tagging products, as well as a link to the presentation so that if anyone wants to access that separately on their own time outside of the recording that we have here, then I can hand that over to Lindsay as well to include in that email.
Wonderful. It looks like we've answered all of the questions and we're done like right at 1, which is pretty impressive. So
good timing.
Thank you. So thank you for putting this together, Alyssa, and thanks everyone for spending your lunch with us. And hopefully we can continue to support our e-commerce businesses. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Thanks for having me. Bye.